Welcome to the Hotelligence Podcast, your strategic vantage point on the changing landscape of hotel safety. Hosted by Jim Kortz, a retired FBI DHS investigator, and Don Carr, a former frontline security owner-operator with years of firsthand incident response experience on hotel properties. Every episode brings you closer to understanding the full picture and what the future may hold. Let's begin.
Welcome back to the Hotelligence Podcast. This is episode 3, Why Hotels Can't Share Information, Even When They Should. I'm Don, and I've spent years responding to incidents on hotel properties across different brands and ownership groups. And one of the questions I hear more than almost any other is some version of, why didn't they warn someone? Or why didn't the hotel next door know? Oftentimes, why didn't corporate know? Or why didn't law enforcement know sooner?
And I'm Jim. I spent years in law enforcement, and what I can tell you is that information sharing sounds simple until you look at the systems, the rules, and the risk surrounding it. So today we're talking about why hotels often can't share information, even in situations where it feels like they should be able to.
And this isn't about indifference.
Right, it's about constraints.
So the sharing assumption, there's a widespread assumption that hotels are part of some informal safety network, that if something concerning happens at one property, the information automatically flows to another property down the street or across town or up to corporate. That's not how it works.
Hotels don't operate as a unified system. Each property is its own legal and operational island, really. Even within the same brand, information doesn't move freely because the moment it does, it creates exposure. So the assumption that sharing is just a choice ignores the risk attached to every piece of information. So let's talk about why information is risky by default. So the moment a hotel shares information that could be tied to a specific guest, it steps into dangerous territory. You have privacy laws, discrimination risk, contractual obligations with brands, and internal policies all come into play at once. Even well-intentioned communication can be interpreted as profiling or unfair treatment if it's not perfectly grounded and consistently applied.
Well said, Jim. And hotels know this. Corporate teams know this. Ownership knows this. So instead of encouraging informal sharing, they build guardrails around guest information, not because they don't care, but because one mistake can create brand-level liability that affects hundreds or even thousands of properties. Hotels don't have sharing infrastructure, and that's another reality people don't see, is that hotels don't have systems designed for cross-property context. They have reservation systems, billing systems, housekeeping systems. They don't have verified, standardized ways to package observations and pass them safely to someone else.
In law enforcement, information sharing requires structure. There are thresholds, documentation standards, oversight, and accountability. Hotels aren't built for that, and trying to act like they are creates more risk than protection. So even when something feels important, there's often nowhere safe for it to go.
And that brings us to ownership and authority, the issue with that. We touched on this in the last episode, but it matters here too. 2 hotels with the same brand name on the front door or sign may have entirely different owners, operators, legal counsel, and policies. That means there's no single authority deciding what can be shared, how it should be framed, or who is responsible if it's wrong.
Without clear ownership of the decision, the safest option is usually silence. Not because it feels right, but because it minimizes unpredictable exposure.
And why law enforcement isn't a simple answer? People often say, why not just call the police and let them handle it?
Right, but calling law enforcement doesn't remove risk for a hotel. It kind of just changes it. Hotels still have to justify why they called, what they observed, and whether that call was appropriate.
Right. And if there's no clear incident, no immediate threat, and no concrete violation, making that call can create as many problems as it solves. Hotels are constantly balancing when involvement is necessary versus when it actually introduces new liability.
That hesitation isn't apathy, it's uncertainty layered on top of real consequences. Now, what about the fear of getting it wrong? So one of the strongest forces shaping hotel behavior is fear of being wrong. Not morally wrong, but procedurally wrong.
And Jim, I've seen staff freeze because they're worried about misinterpreting behavior or miscommunicating internally, even triggering a response they can't control.
Yeah, and once information leaves the building, it can't be pulled back. If it turns out to be incomplete or misunderstood, the damage is already done.
So instead of risking overreach, hotels often default to undersharing. So where the information ends up? Well, when hotels do gather useful context, it often stays trapped in shift notes, in internal logs, in someone's inbox.
There's no safe path for that information to travel beyond the property without changing its risk profile.
So each hotel ends up operating with its own slice of awareness.
Not because they want to be isolated, but because isolation is the least dangerous option available. So finally, let's talk about the reality of the gap. The result is a system where patterns don't easily connect and context doesn't travel.
That's right, Jim. And that gap isn't created by negligence. It's created by design limits.
And until those limits are acknowledged, blaming individual hotels for not sharing information misses the point.
So the problem isn't silence. It's the lack of a safe way to speak. In closing, so when people ask why hotels don't share information more freely, the answer isn't that they don't want to. It's that the risk of sharing often outweighs the protection it might offer.
And understanding that reality is the first step toward understanding what actually needs to change.
And in the next episode, we're going to look at how different types of activity use hotels as infrastructure and why that happens.
It's not emotional, it's structural.
And remember, we're in this together.
And together, we make hospitality stronger.
For a deeper breakdown and added context, sign up for the Hotelligence Insider Briefing. The link is in the show notes.
Thank you for joining the Hotelligence Podcast, where experience informs smarter, safer hotel operations and prepares you for what comes next. Stay informed, stay confident, and stay connected. As the conversation evolves, Jim Cords and Don Carr will highlight developments that help hotels strengthen their approach to safety and risk management. See you next episode.